I'm Ben Maynard. I'm a agile coach, trainer, facilitator. Been around for a while. I suppose most people know me because I'm also a less large scale Scrum trainer, which is a passion of mine. I really enjoy it. I think I spend most of my time really just coaching and training and facilitating in less and non-less environments. And so I've always worked in large organisations, RBS, Deutsche Bank. Always worked with dispersed teams. Always worked remotely. So really, I think I'm really keen to kind of share some of the stuff that I've picked up over the last 15 years in working in remote situations. Really.
Yep, and similar to Ben, spend most of my time training, facilitating some large-scale facilitation as well. Be about 10 years for me in this role, working with some smaller and then larger organizations where we've always got not just one office, but multiple offices. And so remote work has always been a part of my everyday, as well as in-person stuff as well. But we're going to take this combination and hopefully give you some nice little tidbits that you can take back and improve making the most of remote that we have right now. So Ben, do you want to get the timer ready?
I'm ready. I'm primed.
Ready.
I'm primed.
Okay, go.
Okay. So hopefully around my head here you can see a timer. I'm going to try and kind of paste it well. Let me make it a bit bigger because then that fills some time. There you go. So tip number one, connections. Now, this is something which we have borrowed from training from the back of the room. Philiy and I know a few other people here are all training from the back of the room, trainers or practitioners. And the one thing that we've really found massively useful, whether it's facilitation or training, it's a meeting, whatever it is this initial connections activity. And what we found is by using breakout rooms, even if you haven't got breakout rooms, there's ways around that, but to get people connecting to themselves, to each other, and to the topic is even more important when working remotely. Next slide, please, Philiy.
Oh.
Lovely. So why is connections helpful for teams? Well, first of all, no matter what the event, if it's training or a meeting, whatever it is, it helps build a community. So the idea is that you set a question, you run an activity at the very beginning of the event you're holding, or at certain points when you're changing the topic that you're going to cover, to one, most importantly, connect people to each other so they can begin to build relationships that kind of transcend the transactional. All too often we get into situations where the relationships that we build and the meetings, the events, the whatever it may be, it's all very transactional. You may get asked, the typical kind of contrived questions are, hey, what was the last movie you watched, or what's your favorite color, whatever it may be. We look to go a bit deeper than that and have people connect on something relevant to the topic, and connect something and share something from their own lives. This allows us to build relationships on a deeper level, and building relationships on a deeper level helps people feel safe, which moves on to the second point here, which it helps to avoid fight or flight. When people become scared, anxious, when they feel threatened in some way by the environment, by a person, by the topic, they may have just had something awful happen to them before or be fearful of what's coming afterwards. The brain doesn't want to learn anything other than what it needs to survive. So by helping build these relationships, it can help people feel safe and it can help people feel calm and help avoid this fight or flight mechanism. And because we are asking questions which are related to the topic in hand, it primes the mind. So if I'm running a meeting and you're looking to agree a series of goals for the next quarter, let's say, then having people ask about ask questions about the goals, previous goals, whatever it may be, priming their mind for what is about to come, can really give the whole event a boost and give it and from the very moment you begin. Next slide, please, Philiy. So I was distracted by someone who's unable to hear. I hope someone can resolve that for them. So some activity ideas. Some of these are taken from, a lot of them are taken from training from the back of the room. So the pair share is where you're asking a couple of people, or maybe a trio of people, to share something relevant, something they've learned, something that they know about the topic, to each other in a nice, safe environment. Teach backs. This is where you're asking somebody to teach something that you already know about the topic. This means that it helps build that community and relationships, and it level sets. It helps people realize that actually they can learn a lot from these nice people that they're spending time with, and but actually it gives them an opportunity to show that they have some value, they have some worth, they are knowledgeable about the topic too. If it's a reoccurring meeting, if it's a series of events and it's kind of building up towards something, so you can do since we last met, have people share something relevant that's happened since they last met, maybe pick up an old conversation, and then finally the quick draw. So have people draw something. Have people draw something and then share this, go around the room and have them talk about the relevance of that picture to the topic.
I love that it just says, stop.
I'm going to make you a special message, Philiy.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
No profanity. Okay.
Okay.
My timer ready?
Hold on. Yes.
Okay. So the next big tip here is to create a remote team alliance. So you may all have done team alliances with your teams before, but this is basically where you're defining and agreeing how you want to work together. But the thing is that your communication and group norms that your team already have may need to change. They may need to be adapted to where we all find ourselves working remotely now. So the secret of working effectively remotely is trust, right? We can no longer see what everybody's doing. We don't know when they're at their desk, when they're not at their desks, or how they're working. Maybe the way we've agreed that we would work in the past is that if you need something, you just turn up at someone's desk, but that's not possible anymore. So being purposeful and taking the time to really think about it and design something can really, really help. So why is this helpful for teams? So like I said, it creates structure. So we're living in a very complex, changeable time. If we're able to put in a little bit of structure, maybe agreed start times, agreed end times, what we do if we can't make those. Also, we have to remember people's mental health are very important at the moment, especially even as well as physical health. And also people have their kids at home, stuff happens last minute, but how do we create that structure for what do we do when that happens? And how do we let each other know? That in itself can just help people feel a little bit more safe, which pulls me on to psychological safety. If people know what's expected of them and know how to initiate conversations, or one that I find extremely important is how do we interrupt one another? So when we're on camera, when we're on remote conversations, that can be really difficult, getting yourself heard. So maybe a couple of people are already talking and sparring and like going, and getting to hear above everybody can be quite challenging and frustrating and causes some people to just completely disengage. So if we're able to raise that together and design how we want to do that, so maybe it's doing a visual cue like this, like I want to talk, or a lot of video conferencings have a chat function. Maybe you put something in the chat saying, I'd have a question or I'd like to speak next, and everybody just remembers to take a little look at that to make sure they're doing it. So then people feel a lot more safe when they know how to engage and know that they're going to be trusted and they know what's expected. That can calm us down a bit. And also having this allows people to teams to self-correct, have an established way that they want to work. But I'd suggest having regular check-ins for this, especially when it's brand new, just to check, like, is this working? Is this effective? Or do we need to add anything else? So here are just some example questions that you can use to create a team agreement with your teams. So a big one can be cameras on. So cameras on can be really, really helpful for connection, but also some people just aren't comfortable with it. Or maybe you've just been maxed out because you've been on back-to-back calls and you're like, nobody look at me. I need some time to myself. Having more breaks. So it's really important. We have less engagement time, like we switch off quicker when we're remote because you're not looking at a person, you're looking at a screen, and it's much harder to focus. So having more frequent breaks and getting people up to move around, and all of these things. So how will we know if this is working? How do we let each other know when we're away from our desks, and when it's okay not to, or all these things. If we know them up in advance, then it can just help things run smoother and also give people that space to express how they're finding things at the moment. And again, check in on these things frequently. Boom.
No, I'm going to let it run. Ready?
Alt.
Okay. So, different and novel techniques. Are we ready, Philiy?
Oh yeah, because this one's joint. Okay.
Yeah. So, let's start the timer again. So, different and novel techniques. So, there are many great facilitation techniques. I'm sure we all use, and a lot of them work in the room fantastically well. Some of them may not work remotely. However, many of them do. And I think the one thing that I've been consistently surprised at is how well some different and novel techniques really transfer to the remote environment very, very well. Philiy, next slide. And would you like to take this one?
Sure. So we were tight for time tonight, but what we'd like you to do is to take some time and think about what are your strengths? What do you normally rely on in the room? So me personally, when I'm facilitating or working with a team, I rely a lot on getting the sense of the energy in the room, but also looking at body language and being able to see when someone is trying to speak or someone is disengaging. I rely an awful lot on that. Which doesn't necessarily translate to online. And also, I tend to ask a lot of open-ended questions. Given my coaching background, that's a big thing for me in letting the silence sit. Now, that does not work, I have found, in a remote environment because people are worried about talking over one another, or it tends to be the same person answering all the time. So I've found that if I design with the team up front, that I'm going to call their names throughout the session, and it's just to give them a chance to speak. If they don't want to speak, they just say pass, and that's totally fine, but it means that everybody has had a chance. So we suggest you sit down, catalog what you normally like to do, what your strengths are, and say what will work remotely, and then what you may need to find a new solution for. Ben.
And liberating structures. I mean, I think most people are big fans of liberating structures. I've never met anyone that didn't like them. And the two which I've been using a lot recently, one is 1, 2, 4 all. And I think there's various different riffs you can do on that. It works very well remotely, because especially if you have the breakout room functions in Zoom. I mean, I can't emphasize, I think it is a paid for feature, but it really does change things significantly. I've spent the last 2 days delivering an online course, and the people who have been on there, the feedback's been amazing, and I don't think it'd be anywhere near as good if they didn't have the chance to go into those breakout rooms, to work individually, to come together as pairs, to come together as a group, connect to each other, and really have those conversations. So 1, 2, 4 all is one of my favorites to use. I've also used Troika Consulting. Where, with the idea where somebody explains a problem to you, and then the two people discuss the problem and ask questions about it, explore it, come up with some challenging ideas, perhaps come up with some advice. When we do this remotely, you can just have that third person, the person who has the problem, turn their mic off. You can have them turn their camera off, which is the option that we went through. And there's something about having the camera off, which is very, very it's quite liberating, but at the same time, quite nervous because you don't know how that person is reacting. So do be aware that sometimes if the camera is off, you can't read anywhere near as much of what's happening, as Philiy mentioned earlier. Since I've got 30 seconds, one thing I did do, which isn't a liberating structure, but it was different and novel, I think, is I use Miro, how you pronounce it, quite a lot, the interactive whiteboard. And to get people used to using the tool before my course, I set them an Easter egg hunt. So I hid 6 Easter eggs on a Miro board, some on the Post-it notes, some were tiny, some were large, all around. And then the challenge was that before the course began, they had to go in and find all 6. It was a bit fun. They remembered it, but it also got them used to using the tool.
Cease. And then if I could just, I think we've maybe like a minute left. Just add that a nice hack, if you can have the Zoom breakout rooms, like my current client doesn't have that functionality. What we've been doing is just creating separate meeting rooms, and then people will disperse and go off to have those smaller conversations, and then come back to the main room, and a representative from each of those rooms shares back. So it's still giving people that ability to have those smaller conversations together. Thank you. This is Ben and I's details if you'd like to stay in touch. And we also have some remote facilitation masterclasses at the moment, and you can register your interest on this link below. Anything else, Ben?
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Philly. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that. Is there anything else from you, Ben or Philly there?
No, just thank you very much for listening to us, for sticking on, and we're looking forward to hearing the people that are coming up next.
Phew,
Brilliant.
did it.
So I had a couple of questions come in, and I will ask those at the end to all, as I mentioned and as discussed. Some good ones. So I'm now going to hand over to our second talk of the evening, Ravi. Shah is a management consultant at Capgemini Invent. Her talk is on building your brand the Agile way. So Shah, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Apologies, I kept switching off and on my video some time back because unexpectedly my son who went walking came into the room and he wanted all my attention. So that has been my remote working for how many number of weeks now. So this is sort of relaxing that I don't have to do any sort of project or product type meetings, and I talk and someone listens rather than questioning me all the time. So yeah, I love it. So I'm going to share my presentation screen and we'll take it from there. Yay. Oh, it's not bad. Okay, I hope you can all see my screen. Not if you can. Oh yeah, good. All right, that's great. All right, okay, so I'm going to talk about building your brand, building your personal brand, the Agile way. So I usually talk about building your brand, and I think it's really important. I found it very useful that I had a personal brand, especially when I moved from sort of India to work in the UK, where I found everything to be very competitive and I had to fight for my place and all that. I've sort of added some agile spices onto that talk, and I really love this new version of it. Because I traditionally come from sort of a waterfall background, so I have more work experience working in waterfall-based projects. So when I first Agile came our way, I was like, oh, this is something weird. Are we going to adopt these new ways of working? Oh no, and I felt very fear and all that. Now I adopt Agile ways of working in everything. We sort of have a stand-up every morning with my son. We talk about what he did yesterday, what he wants to do today and what not. It's really cool. And he sort of joins my stand-up that I have at work every morning and waves at my friends. So I'm super Agile adopter now. So moving on. So like the slide says, and like I was introduced, I'm Shah. I work as a senior consultant with Capgemini Invent. We predominantly work on digital consulting projects. So what do? I work with my clients and help them to do awesome stuff because I'm awesome. In other words, I work with businesses to sort of help them with digital delivery and also enable agile transformation, moving to the cloud and those sort of things. Like I said, my small story, this was one question that was in my head when I first moved to London and took up a job in a startup. So how do I thrive in my job? How do I advance in my career? I kept asking those questions again and again to myself because I found it really hard and very competitive to hold on to a place in my job. I thought people were like talking over me all the time. People didn't trust me or people didn't understand what value I bring to them. That's when someone advised me, which sort of resonates with me, and I share this with everyone I meet. So the person who actually asked me to make an effort to be heard and sort of, cajoled to tell my story wisely. They thought I was like blabbering around when someone asked me what I'm good at and what I do. So it's important to tell your story wisely. And how do you do that? It's using your personal brand. So it's important that you find your personal brand, build it, keep working on it, and keep talking about it. The keep talking about it part there is as important as finding your brand itself, because it's important that you let people know what you want to be known for, what your unique brilliance and what What do you bring to the table? How can you add value, say, in your company that you work for, or in your own business, or any sort of conversation that you're having? So it's important to keep talking about your brand. That will definitely help you make a lasting impact. Like I said, building a brand is sort of a big project in itself. So you have to, I quite worked hard on it. So I think like other projects, any other project these days, it's important to adopt agile ways of working when you implement it. So just, my earphone does not stay in my ear. I don't know why. Anyway, so like I said, adopting some agile ways of working in this massive project is very important. So I have some tips for you on that. Moving ahead. So the first one is when you work on your brand or build your brand, it's important that you do it iteratively. It's important you start with investing only small chunks of time. So this will help you to sort of, effectively bend your, so you have a brand strategy. So something that you want to be known for instance, I want to be known as an expert in product management or whatever. So you try that could be your brand strategy. If you divide your building your brand initiative into small chunks of time, that will help you sort of effectively enable you to bend and stretch your the way you want to achieve it. So, and also when you divide your sort of brand building work, which spans over a few months of time, into small chunks of work over like day-to-day activities, it will help you stay focused. It'll help you understand why you're doing a particular task and how that's adding value to your brand. The next point that is to build your brand focusing on the value. For instance, say you want to be, like I said, you want to be an expert or SME in product management. You can say you can sort of buy your website and start talking about it, or set it up, write a lot of articles and all that. So that requires a lot of energy and time beforehand. If you start small, like start with the simplest of things. Say you might want to start with writing an article on LinkedIn, and instead of focusing your energy on building this whole website, you can focus your energy on sort of marketing or sharing your the stuff you've written. So it's important to understand where you need to focus your energy on, and it's also important to focus on the simplest thing, because brand building and talking about your brand might not come naturally to everyone. So if you go big bang and that doesn't click, people will tend to give up midway and not go through with it, and this project might become a flop. So it's important you need to sort of start with the small things and understand what value it delivers. The next one is to be consistent. So that's very important. I think something I did really well when I started building my brand. So a lot of people realize that they need a personal brand to themselves. They start working on it. Midway, when they get to a place, they sort of forget about it and come back. They come back to it for about after 2 months or say, I'm like, what's my brand again? And or if you stop talking about it to other people, you sort of lose your place in the scene. So it's important to be consistent with brand building and sort of talking about your brand. I think it's important to you look at it or work on it at least once a week. Next important thing is network. So I strongly believe that networking is golden, especially it's important in brand building, because you sort of your brand needs to be sustainable. It's important it is shaped by the conversations you have with your network. It's important that you involve others in your brand building activity, also help support them in building their brand. And this network will also help you, where you can seek out help if you need any support in terms of, say, you're hunting for your job and your network knows what you're known for, a unique brilliance. When you reach out to someone asking for a job, you don't have to prove yourself again. So it's important that you have that network, establish that relationship, seek help and support whenever it's required. It's important. It doesn't matter if you have like 500 connections on LinkedIn and you don't reach out to them for any sort of support. As a matter of fact, I'm presenting here today because we had this. I sort of had a presentation delivered for Philiy for another meetup. So it just like we use the network really well and sort of collaborate. So that's very important. The next bit is getting feedback. So you're building your brand and you're doing it like in small chunks of time, and also you are consistent with it and all that. But it will not work if you don't get regular feedback. Say, I started sort of talking in events about building your brand and also about being a woman in tech. Something that really helped me to improve my speech was to actually walking up to the audience and talking to people and understanding how they liked my talk. So I think it's important to be brave enough to walk up to someone and ask for feedback. And mostly 80% of the time, people will give their feedback, and it's also important to take that feedback. I used to be this person who always rejected negative feedback. I always said, oh, no, I think that person is jealous. So I'm getting a negative feedback. So it's important that you take both positive and negative feedback and incorporate that as part of your brand building. The next one is the most important one, to be adaptive, to learn and change. So it's important that you're willing to change. You might end up, changing your whole brand. Like I said, I come from a waterfall world where I used to be this business analyst, and my CV often read detail-oriented person who sort of does exhaustive documentation and can do UML diagrams and whatnot. But if I write that in my CV now, well, I'm capable of doing it. It doesn't make sense. So because we have moved to the agile ways of working, where my brand would be to work with product-focused company rather than project-oriented ones. I've changed my brand, so I need to be able to sort of change it quickly enough so that I can respond to the changes in the world. So yeah, people say it's important to be risk-averse, but it's also important to respond to opportunity and use it wisely. Just to sum it up, your brand is something that will draw people and opportunities to you. Just to repeat what all I sort of did in the other slides, it's important that you're iterative and you're always present when you're talking and building your brand. So what I did, I started sort of a blog talking about being a woman in tech, being a working mom, and around product management. And I also think I use social media, LinkedIn. My profile talks about my brand, and I'm also part of online communities where I'm able to share. The other aspect is collaboration and networking. Like I said, it's important that you build these relationships and you need to use them wisely. Don't be shy to ask for help. The other one is to know the value delivered and showcase it. So be braggy is the tagline I keep using. So I'm a mentor to a few colleagues of mine at work, and in every conversation I have with them, I always tell them not to be shy, to be braggy. I think I'm super braggy and I'm super proud about it. I'm not humble at all. I think one should understand their own value and not to be shy, not try to sort of brag about it. And it's also important you build a platform where you can actively talk about your achievements. The last point is staying relevant. I think it's important because so many things in the world keep changing. So now we sort of work remotely, so we need new skills. So it's important to be adaptive to your change. And one of the things I use is volunteering opportunities. So it's very good to sort of hone up your soft skills, and it's free usually. And it also gives you a satisfaction that you've helped someone. At the end of it, you also learn quite a few things. Recently, before this lockdown, we had this mock digital interview at a high school somewhere in the north of London, and something I learned was to how positively can I give feedback to these young kids. So every opportunity, especially these volunteering opportunities, helps me learn a lot of things. Another important thing I believe everyone should attempt doing is to engage with your employer and let them know what sort of training you want to, get into. So it's important to walk up to your manager to talk about it. So if you can go to them with a plan, say, you know what, I'm here today. I want to get here at the end of the year, and these are the skills I want to develop. And do you mind sending me on these trainings? If you do your research and have a story, 90% of the time they're going to say, okay. The last bit there is to spend time on reflection, which is very important. That's the best feedback I've got. So after every important meeting, or say even an interview, I go back and reflect on it on my own, and that sort of makes me understand the mistakes I make, the areas I'm good at, and helps me focus on it. Finally, I'm the hero of my life. So it's important you have your own brand, personal brand, and you talk about it and you feel that you own your life. That's really important. That's all for me.
Thank you very much, Shah. I thought that was great. Really, really inspiring how positive you are. And
thank you.
Enjoyed the bit about sort of being open to positive and negative feedback. I also agree with that. I think that's really, really important. Thank you very much. Do keep the questions coming in, guys, in the chat at the bottom so I can ask everyone at the end. I'm now going to hand over to Jem Dejalal, our third and final talk for the evening. Jem's talk is on how how they're helping NHS workers fight COVID-19. Jem is head of HR for Heroes and a coach at Zego. Jem, you might wish to correct me on that. So I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just want to get a sound check. Can you hear me? Awesome, thank you.
I can hear you perfectly, personally.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, Zego, that's what's up. No one can get my surname right, so I'm thinking of changing my surname from Jem Jalal to Jem Jelly. Don't know how proud my grandfather would be, but never mind. So don't feel too bad. I'll share my screen. Let's have a look. Cool. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Great. All right. So this talk here is, as with a lot of good talks, there's a story in this. And in my family, oh, by the way, Alex, I think there's a few people you got waiting in the lobby. You've seen it pop up if you don't know. In my family, there are a few doctors, and this is quite close to my heart. In fact, the picture top right-hand corner is my first cousin there. What I've been doing for the last almost 5 weeks is trying to do something where I think a lot of us feel a level of anxiety, feel a little bit helpless, and there's a lot of unknowns. And this talk today is about using business agility to help NHS workers handle COVID, okay? We'll start here. First rule of business agility: stop talking about agility. Stop talking about agile. What I mean by that is, look, when you're working in a startup, or in fact many places, no one really cares about Kanban, Scrum, XP, Agile. Just think of any entrepreneur that you work with. Think of people at the Dragon's Den, or just think of the everyday person. They might care about time to market. They might care about people turning up full of beans, giving their best. People care about mitigating risk. People care about having an engaged workforce. But just the words alone, I think we've done it to death. So this is something that I've certainly stayed away from, not in just this current role as, where I'm at Zego or Heroes. It's a bit of a philosophy that I've adopted over the last few years. Organize around value. It's great. Everybody wants to do certain things in their own way. But what trumps everything is what value is. And value, of course, is subjective. But that's why it was so important when I joined this organization to understand what the vision was. For example, the most important thing in the first 2 weeks was to get money. If we couldn't get any money, it wouldn't allow us to enable anything that we do. The vision has now changed. It's not actually about money. Money is still important, sure, but it's all about PPE, the personal protection equipment that we need to get out there. Once you understand value, we can then focus on the needs. In other words, the people that are going to bring value to life. Let's understand what people then actually want and what processes that we want to surface to enable that, and then go do it. Okay. Just very quickly to touch on this, I'm sure most of you have seen the Stacy matrix, Cynefin. There's all types of things around complexity. If you've not seen this diagram on the left, we're just looking at a model that tries to help you understand the type of work you're doing. If it's simple, putting on a light switch, the lights come on, cause and effect is known. If it's complicated, you might need an expert. That's when your watches, your clock has been broken. If it's complex, it's in the domain of experiments and things whereby we don't know how to experience it. And if it's chaos, that's the fire that you need to put out and we need to react. So educating people on wearing different lenses to understand different problems, all without using the words agile is very important, because when you talk about a risk to people, you get their attention. Next part to that was deciding how to decide. In a perfect world, everybody would be given full autonomy and everybody can make all the decisions that they want, but we should also be mindful of being too absolute about that. Are you with me? Like, we live in a very agile coach world. If the house is on fire, that's not the time for me to ask you, how do you feel about the fumes in your lungs? There may be a more direct approach that I might want to take to say, we need to move and we need to get out of here. So what I'm saying is you have to be dynamic, and this is what we've tried and we're succeeding at Heroes, so that we can enable people, but to make it clear that on certain repeatable things, we don't have to get crazy innovative over it. So what kind of problems are we trying to solve? Look, when we're talking about, to frame the conversation, business agility, this is what we need to start with. So in Heroes, speaking with my cousin, and let's say another co-founder, what problem are you trying to solve? Your NHS workers, one's a cardiologist, one's a surgeon. And as you know, a lot of doctors now have to turn their hand to work in COVID wards because of the lack of capacity. Now, it's no secret that PPE, if you've not come across this term, it involves a variety of things, face masks, eye shields, gowns, scrubs, other types of challenges, psychological help. They're talking about a lot of trauma, a lot of psychological stress for the people facing off, not because of just the nature of what they're doing, but the duration and the amount of unknowns. We're asking a lot of NHS workers to turn up and deal with something which is quite scary, but they don't even have the equipment in some cases. Food, coffee, availability, don't underestimate these types of needs for humans. In most hospitals, so let's say some that I've heard of in North London, canteens don't operate, and being able to get food after a 12 or 16-hour shift is pretty hard work. So to enable the basics for humans is really, really important. Transport. We've seen pictures of the Piccadilly line, the Central line, even with social distancing, and it's not to judge the people that have to do it to get to work, but the last thing that we want is for the people trying to help the people who are sick to also become sick if it can be prevented. And funding. So this is actually for Heroes, or help them help us in itself. Without the funding, we can't enable any of these things. So what are the responses that we've tried to provide and deal with? Well, PPE equipment. Now, we've done our very best to look at various avenues. There's a certain amount of PPE equipment like face masks and eye shields in the populace. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been a little opportunistic about selling these things. So whether it's 3M or importing things from overseas, keep in mind, it's not just PPE used in the medical field, it's also used in, let's say, building or for decorators. When we're talking about food, or we're talking about cars, we're talking about grants. We want to make it easy for NHS workers to be able to, if they want to order a pizza or order an Uber, we don't want to create an overhead. So we want to make money accessible for quick and easy things. We're also providing a service whereby we are matching NHS workers with counsellors, with therapists. And the important part here is about ease, okay? So no doubt these services are available, but how easily available are they? Childcare still does happen. Somebody would still have to look after NHS workers' children, and there are key workers in certain groups, again, which we are trying to provide a service for. So if you think about it, there is a demand for something, whether it's masks or whether it's food or whether it's taxis or whether it's grants, and we are trying to match up and provide the relevant service. So these are some of our partners or collaborators. Now, it could be whether it's William White, you may or not heard of them, or Restaurant Story, Chili Bee, Selfridges. All of these peers had an interest in wanting to do good, which I'm sure you'll know in such a time, lots of people go above and beyond to try and offer some sort of help. Now, whether it's the 4,000 Easter eggs from Selfridges, or it's Addison Lee providing cars for the logistics to drop off the masks, or the amount of hand cream that I think a lot of NHS workers would take your hand off for, no pun intended, because we know how arduous, and we know how much people's hands chafe. All these little things count. We recently had quite a few celebrity chefs. Not that it matters that they're celebrity chefs, but the fact is they may have the resource and the capacity to, they cooked, say, 300 pizzas, or they made X amount of, Thai food dishes, and they brought them to St. Bart's. All of these things help. There's an intrinsic purpose for these things. So we can't go into all of the services that we spoke about. Consider all of these things as services. So let's quickly touch on PPE. PPE, when you break it down, masks, helmets, gloves, eye protection clothing. Think about the sources where these things originate from. So there are manufacturers, and we know that 3M have been inundated with the actual demand to supply the population. Now, there's all types of contentious conversation around, are masks effective or are they not? But either way, what we're seeing is a lot of Joe Public acquiring masks just to be on the safe side. The unintended consequence of that is that the people who are in the COVID wards that need the protection may not get their hands on it. Amazon, anyone go to Amazon and source masks, you can go anywhere all over the world. Now, the quality and the safety of it, we don't know, but they're available. Fashion designers have even turned their hand to try and create things like scrubs or face masks and so on. But again, we don't know what the safety is. Existing users. So what we've done is, there's a gentleman called Mr. Ford. He's an amazing man. He owns a large kind of contracting type of, say, company. And he is providing all of his vans and all of his workers and all of their PPE equipment, and they're donating these to hospitals all over the land. And this has created some sort of, there's a bit of a ricochet, or if you like, it started to attract other people who also want to donate what they have. Now, with that said, at the same time, what if you can't still get enough? Well, the question then was, why can't we create our own visors? Why can't we start creating our own PPE? And in terms of like business agility, I think this kind of, hits it on the nose, because this is what we've done. This is Dom here, one of the co-founders. He's a cardiologist, and this is him on his way to a COVID ward. We've created a print farm in London. It's known as Shield. And we got together with some designers who are specifically skilled in the development of these types of pieces of equipment. And we're able to print 1,500 visors a day. And through our network, we're able to provide these visors all over the land and get these out in front of the right people. So when we're talking about agility, it's about being creative to be able to meet the needs or, handle things when we're unable to get hold of some sort of supply, because there is a demand. And as we come to the end here, you may or may not be curious to know around how we organize. This is what I mean about, it's not Scrum and it's not Kanban or it's not XP. Sure, those ideas play out, but what we start with here at the top, if you look at the top part here where we talk about network, legal, procurement, logistics, PR, network is about what's needed and where. Does somebody need a mask somewhere? Well, what do we need to consider? Look, you've got to be careful to cover your backside, because you can't go around handing out masks and so on and so forth without a level of, with some sort of disclaimer. So if you're going to use things, you've got to use them, on your own responsibility. How do we get it there? How do we get it? Certain things we need to procure, we need to buy, we need to bring in. But in this case, so for example, from Ireland, we've procured, I think, around 30,000 masks that we're bringing in. So that's a good example whereby it's not just about being binary with the way you provide your service. You don't have to just build it or get people to volunteer things in. If there's somebody else selling it at cost rate, get it that way. How do we get it there? Logistics is quite a complex operation to take different types of food sources. There's no point in someone cooking something in Kent if you're delivering to a hospital in East London. So matching up the actual need with the service is quite an operation. And then sharing success, make no bounds about it. If you cannot demonstrate what you're doing, we've had people collaborating, doing stuff on This Morning, on the BBC, on ITV, because what this does is it raises awareness for sure, but it also brings in people such as, say, Maddox Gallery, whereby Boy George, recently sold a painting for X amount, and they're aiming to raise £1 million for the charity. These areas of network, legal, procurement, as you can see the card on the left, which says, the Get 1,500 Advisors to Liverpool, they're the actual, that's what we care about. The little individual pieces we don't care about. And so what we do is we have functions that come together as a working group, not as a team as such, because we don't have enough people, and they focus on the weekly deliverable. And you could say that looks like a portfolio Kanban board. So as we close up, to date, we're only 4.5 weeks old. We've raised £700,000. And it's just a testament to people's generosity and how in such difficult times, people will really show you why, you need to restore your faith back into humanity. And we go on from there. If you'd like to learn more, we are at helpthem.helpus.co.uk. My name is Jem Jalal, probably Jem Jelly after this. I'm going to make that change. You can come at me if you want to hear any more ideas on how to kick off the startup. And that's where it's at. Thank you for listening.
Jem, thank you very much. Firstly, apologies for getting your name wrong initially.
No,
it won't happen again. Great talk. Extremely relevant. Amazing achievement in such a short space of time. And what you're doing is fantastic. Credit to you. So I've got some questions that have come in. So I'll start with Ben and Philiy first. To Ben and Philiy, do you have any tips that would help introverts or even people with a stammer who may feel intimidated in remote conversations? When you have a stammer, speaking in a remote conversation is extremely intimidating. And as you can obviously see the expressions of everyone struggling to understand you. Whereas if you're in a physical meeting room, it's not quite as obvious to see everyone's reaction. That's to Ben and Philiy.
It's an awesome question. It's an awesome question. And I think there is an element of, it's tough because, from a facilitation perspective, you have to help people to be patient and understand, I think. Philiy, have you got any specific ideas?
So I don't know if this person is talking from personal experience or it's them that has the stammer or it's others, but if I was in that situation, I'd probably just ask the person what would help them. And if they would really rather prefer and they feel so awkward with it, maybe they could type what they say and we could nominate someone to read out what it is that they want to get across. Or I know with some of my teams, we use facilitation cards. So might be common phrases like, I have a question, or tell me more about that we can just hold up to the screen, and then everybody's using them and it doesn't quite feel so different. But I would just ask them what they would prefer.
And one really useful technique is the right to pass, which is something that should always be offered. There's people who have many hidden disabilities or not hidden disabilities, and I think that there are many of the activities which you can do remotely or in person aren't suitable for people. So making it really, really clear that people have the right to pass on any of the activities, and no one will judge them on that, is a great thing that I think you should do in most situations. Also, perhaps I'm quite keen on people doing preparation work. So if there is prep work that people can do, if people can come armed with something written, if they can put it onto a remote whiteboard or something, so that then a lot of the facilitating you're doing is around moving around the information which has been presented previously, using things like dot voting to kind of shift the balance, so it is less of people talking. If that person with the stammer feels uncomfortable, then that could also be an option.
Okay, thank you. So another question directly for Philiy. In most remote sessions, there is usually one or more dominant voice. What is the best way to keep these voices limited to allow all to participate?
Um, this is the famous thing. It's like, it depends. So that technique I mentioned about calling out individuals' names to give people the space to talk. So again, designing that up front so people know that you're going to do that. So it's not as if you're going, okay, we've heard from you, let's hear from somebody else. Or you can ask the question, does anybody have an idea that's different? Which sometimes will make the space and stimulate someone else to step in. Or like Ben was mentioning there, using different techniques. So having a way that people can live edit, like basically in any way that we normally use a post-it note, live, some ways that you can do that remotely. I am a huge fan of Google Suite products. So using like say Google Slides and creating a little board on there because it's free and everybody can use that, and you just create a new shape and type stuff in it and then everybody can move it around, then everybody's voice is the same level. And if it's something that happens all the time, I'd like to have a chat with the person one-on-one and talk to them. And often the person that's dominant might be the team lead or might be the person with the most experience or knowledge. And I sometimes will have a conversation to say, I think it's great that you know the answers, and we know you have the most expertise in this, but we want to make sure that the whole team is coming up and along. And if they don't get the chance to voice, then they might not develop that way. So maybe give them a beat first, let them try and answer first, encourage them, and then obviously you can give your opinion after. So it depends, but there's a few options for you.
Thank you. Another Philiy, any tips to help with engagement when participants are not able to join with video?
Tips so they can't join the video, so I assume everybody's just on audio then?
Yeah, I think that's what the question alludes to. I'll read it out again. Any tips to help with engagement when participants are not able to join with video?
I think the verge on over communicating a little bit. I think, like Philiy was saying, using people's names, checking in with people, making the time to check in with everybody. If you can, if you're doing a long session, you're having breaks, then make the breaks a little bit longer and catch up with people one-on-one if you feel that people are struggling engaging. When I was facilitating the last 2 days, one of the groups was taking a lot of notes, and if I couldn't have seen them taking notes, I would have had no idea what they were doing. So I think that I would have been sat there just really worrying, thinking, oh my God, what are they? Are they switching off? Are they even there? Are they doing something else? And I think that over communicating, asking them the question, doing little techniques like checking for understanding, asking a question about what's just been covered, trying to get them engaging in some way, and humor. I think that sometimes facilitation is a bit too dry. I think that being humorous, having a laugh, cracking a joke, breaking down some of those barriers, making people feel safe, means that even if they aren't visible, then hopefully they'll feel freer to contribute, and you can feel more comfortable that you've got the relationships. If something isn't right with them, then they'll let you know. Philiy, anything?
Yeah, just that, like you said, you have to be a lot more muscular with your facilitation than you would be when you've got some visual cues. So like you said, making the space. And another good thing, especially if say it's stand up or something where people have to go one after the other, keeping it random who's going to go next. So I would say, okay, Ben, if you give your update, please nominate the next person to go. And then people tend to stay a little bit engaged because they're like, oh, I'm next, or I don't know when I'm going to be. So they might listen a little bit more.
It's like I got the name toss. It's like a ball toss, but you're doing it at somebody's name. And I love it as a technique because people really have to pay attention then. It's fun.
Thank you. That's actually it for questions. Shah, I will say I've had some very positive feedback on how positive your talk was. Someone said that's come at a very, very timely time for them, so that's great. Jem, I've also had some good feedback on your talk. No questions, but people are asking for your contact details so they can get in touch to try and source some visors for frontline social care and home care workers. So that's great. I have recorded this, so I will publish that. What I will say as well is, just to reiterate, if you want to talk, if you want to host, reach out to me or Sina or Toby, and we'll facilitate that for you. I want to try and run one of these every Wednesday evening. I've pretty much got one set up every Wednesday for the next 3 or 4 weeks, but I am always looking for speakers. Additionally as well, it is tough times. If you are out of work at the moment and you're looking for work, Oliver Bernard, we're all fully working remotely, but every one of our recruiters does contract and perm. There are still some companies hiring out there that are onboarding or interviewing, onboarding and offering and starting people remotely. So don't lose hope. You know, we really do want to try and help as many people as we can find a new job, get back into work, and even just to start conversations. You know, we're here for you if you do want any help or advice, or to talk about what you're not sort of. So very much got in for next Wednesday. Details follow, and I hope to see you all very soon.